You're born inside an egg, tucked away on a narrow ledge beneath a bridge. Your mother pressed herself into this cramped space weeks ago, building what can barely be called a nest. It's just a few twigs and scraps of garbage held together by determination. She sits on you and your sibling, keeping you warm while cars thunder overhead. The vibrations shake everything, but this is home. Inside the shell, you're growing fast. Your beak taps against the inside, testing the walls of your tiny prison. Something tells you it's time to get out. You push harder, using a small tooth on your beak to crack through. Your sibling is doing the same thing right next to you. The shell gives way, splitting open like a broken window. You tumble out, wet and exhausted. You can't see much yet. Your eyes are barely open, and your body is covered in yellow fuzz. You're not exactly beautiful, but your parents don't seem to mind. Your father arrives with food, and your mother takes it from him, chewing it up before dropping it into your open mouth. It's not appetizing, but you're not in a position to complain. The first few days are all about eating and growing. Your parents take turns bringing food and keeping you warm. Your father works harder than your mother, flying back and forth with whatever he can find. Sometimes it's seeds, sometimes it's breadcrumbs, and occasionally it's something that probably wasn't meant for birds. You eat it anyway because hunger doesn't leave room for preferences. Your sibling is just as demanding as you are. There's no sharing, no taking turns. When food arrives, you both stretch your necks as high as possible, mouths wide open, hoping to get there first. The louder you squawk, the more attention you get. It's not personal, it's survival. After about a week, your eyes open properly, and the world comes into focus. The first thing you notice is how high up you are. The ledge is narrow, and beyond it is nothing but empty space. Cars pass below, looking like colorful beetles crawling along the pavement. You instinctively stay away from the edge. Falling is not an option. Your body changes quickly. The yellow fuzz falls away, replaced by gray and white feathers. Your wings grow stronger, and you start flapping them, testing how they work. At first, it's just random movement, but gradually you figure out the rhythm. Your parents watch from nearby, calling encouragement that sounds more like criticism. Then comes the day when everything changes. Your mother lands on the ledge and doesn't bring food. Instead, she calls to you, flapping her wings and backing toward the edge. You understand what she wants, but you're not ready. Flying looks terrifying. She calls again, more insistently this time. Your sibling goes first. They spread their wings, hesitate for a moment, then launch themselves into the air. They don't fall, they actually fly, wobbling and unsteady, but airborne. They land on a nearby building, calling back to you triumphantly. Now it's your turn. Your mother won't let you stay. She nudges you closer to the edge, and you realize you don't have a choice. You spread your wings, feeling the wind catch under them. Your heart pounds as you look down at the ground far below. Then you jump. For a split second, you're falling. Panic floods your system as you flap frantically, trying to remember what your wings are supposed to do. Then something clicks. The air catches you, lifts you, and suddenly you're flying. It's clumsy and terrifying, but you're actually doing it. You aim for the same building where your sibling landed, but your approach is all wrong. You come in too fast and too steep, slamming into the side of the wall before scrambling onto the roof. Your sibling looks at you like you're an embarrassment to the family. You don't care. You're alive and you're flying. The next few weeks are all about learning. Flying is harder than it looks, and landing is even worse. You crash into windows, overshoot branches, and occasionally find yourself tangled in someone's laundry line. But each day gets a little easier. Your parents teach you where to find food. The city is full of opportunities if you know where to look. People drop crumbs everywhere, outside cafes, near park benches, around bus stops. They're careless with their food, and that carelessness becomes your advantage. You learn to watch human behavior. Some people throw food deliberately, scattering breadcrumbs or seeds for birds like you. These humans are treasures, and you remember their faces and their routines. Others wave their arms and shout when they see you coming. These humans are problems, but they're usually too slow to actually catch you. The real education comes from watching other pigeons. They've figured out systems that took generations to perfect. You learn to follow the crowd when someone finds a good food source. If one pigeon discovers a dropped sandwich, within minutes, there are dozens of birds fighting over the scraps. Fighting is part of life. Food is never guaranteed, and competition is fierce. You learn to be aggressive when you need to be. If another pigeon tries to steal your find, you puff up your chest, spread your wings, and make yourself look bigger. Sometimes that's enough. Other times, you have to actually fight, pecking, clawing, and wrestling until one of you gives up. But pigeons aren't your only worry. The city is full of predators that see you as an easy meal. Hawks circle overhead, their sharp eyes scanning for careless birds. Cats lurk in alleys and under parked cars, waiting for you to land within striking distance. Even some humans are threats. Kids with slingshots, adults with brooms, and city workers with nets. You develop paranoia as a survival skill. You never land without checking the area first. You always keep one eye on the sky and another on potential escape routes. When you're eating, you look up every few seconds to make sure nothing is stalking you. It's exhausting, but it keeps you alive. Your parents start spending less time with you and your sibling. They've done their job. You can fly, you can find food, and you can avoid most dangers. Now they're focused on their next clutch of eggs. This is how pigeon families work. Intense care for a short period, then independence. You and your sibling drift apart too. There's no family loyalty in the pigeon world. You might see each other at food sources, but you're just as likely to compete against each other as cooperate. That's fine with you. You've got your own life to figure out. The city becomes your territory. You learn which buildings have the best roosting spots, which streets have the most dropped food, and which areas are too dangerous to visit. You develop routines, returning to the same places at the same times each day. Humans think pigeons are stupid, but that's not true. You're incredibly smart. You just think differently than they do. You can navigate using landmarks, remember hundreds of different locations, and even recognize individual human faces. You learn to associate certain sounds with food opportunities. The jingle of keys means someone is leaving their house. The rustle of a bag means someone might drop something edible. You figure out how to exploit human habits. Office workers eat lunch at the same time every day, often in the same places. Street vendors drop crumbs when they're setting up or cleaning up. Construction workers leave food scraps around job sites. Every pattern is an opportunity. The seasons change, and so do your challenges. Winter is the hardest time. Food is scarce, and the cold makes everything more difficult. You learn to find warm places to roost, near heating vents, under bridges where the wind can't reach, or in abandoned buildings that trap heat. You also learn to store energy when food is abundant. During good times, you eat as much as possible, building up fat reserves for the lean periods. Your body becomes a living storage system, capable of surviving days without food when necessary. Spring brings new opportunities and new dangers. Food becomes more plentiful as humans spend more time outside. But spring also means nesting season, and that brings complications. you're not ready for yet. Other pigeons become territorial, claiming the best roosting spots and defending them aggressively. You watch the older birds with interest. They seem to know things you don't, where the safest nests are, which humans are most likely to share food, how to avoid the city workers who sometimes try to control the pigeon population. You learn by observing, copying their techniques, and adapting them to your own needs. The city changes around you constantly. Buildings go up and come down, new restaurants open, bringing new food opportunities. Traffic patterns shift, creating new dangers and new safe passages. You adapt to all of it because adaptation is what pigeons do best. Your world is a complex network of risks and rewards. Every decision matters: where to land, when to fly, which food source to pursue. Make the wrong choice, and you could end up as someone's lunch. Make the right choice, and you live another day. But you're not just surviving, you're thriving. Your feathers have grown in properly now, showing the iridescent greens and purples that make pigeons more beautiful than most people realize. Your flight skills have improved dramatically. You can navigate tight spaces, make sharp turns, and land precisely where you want to. You've become a master of urban survival, but the city has more lessons to teach you. One morning, while picking at scattered popcorn near a movie theater, you notice something different about yourself. There's a restlessness you haven't felt before, an urge that has nothing to do with food or safety. You're almost 2 years old now, and your body is telling you it's time to find a mate. Finding the right partner isn't as simple as just picking another pigeon. You need to prove yourself worthy. Male pigeons don't just win over females with good looks, though your iridescent feathers certainly help. You need to show that you're strong, that you can provide, and that you know how to build a decent nest. Your first attempt at courtship is embarrassing. You spot a female near a fountain and decide to impress her with your best moves. You puff out your chest, spread your tail feathers, and start the traditional pigeon dance, a series of bows, turns, and coos that should demonstrate your fitness as a mate. Instead, you trip over your own feet and nearly fall into the water. She flies away without even looking back, but you don't give up. You watch other males, studying their techniques. The successful ones have confidence. They approach females with purpose, not desperation. They choose their moments carefully, waiting until the female is relaxed and receptive rather than busy or stressed. You try again with a different female. This time, you're more patient. You land nearby, but don't immediately start your display. Instead, you casually peck at the ground, showing that you're not needy or aggressive. When she seems comfortable with your presence, you begin a subtle courtship routine. A few soft coos, some gentle head movements, nothing too dramatic. She doesn't fly away immediately, which you take as encouragement. You escalate gradually, adding more elaborate movements to your display. You bow deeply, spreading your wings and fanning your tail. You circle around her, making sure she can see your best angles. Your coos become more musical, more insistent. Then something magical happens. She responds. She doesn't run away or ignore you. Instead, she mirrors some of your movements, cocking her head in a way that suggests interest. You've made a connection, but courtship is just the beginning. If you want to seal the deal, you need to prove you can provide. Food sharing is a crucial part of pigeon romance. You need to find something special, something that shows you're a capable provider. You spend the next hour searching for the perfect offering. It can't be just any scrap. It needs to be high quality. You finally find it, a partially eaten croissant someone dropped near a coffee shop. It's fresh, buttery, and exactly the kind of delicacy that impresses potential mates. You fly back to where she's waiting, the croissant clutched carefully in your beak. You land beside her and gently offer your gift. She examines it critically before accepting. This is the moment of truth. She takes a bite, chews thoughtfully, then looks at you with what you hope is approval. The next phase involves mutual preening, an intimate bonding activity where you gently clean each other's feathers. It's surprisingly relaxing, and it serves multiple purposes. It helps maintain feather health, but more importantly, it builds trust and reinforces your pair bond. Now comes the real test, nest building. You need to find the perfect location, somewhere safe from predators, protected from weather, but accessible for daily comings and goings. After scouting dozens of potential sites, you settle on a ledge under the eaves of an old office building. It's not fancy, but it's functional. Building a nest is harder than it looks. You need to gather materials, twigs, grass, paper scraps, anything that can be woven together into a sturdy platform. Your mate helps, but she's clearly judging your construction skills. Pigeons might not be architectural geniuses, but there are still standards to maintain. Your first attempt collapses immediately. The twigs aren't properly interlocked, and the whole structure falls apart when you try to sit on it. Your mate gives you a look that suggests she might reconsider this whole relationship. You try again, this time paying more attention to the foundation. You weave the larger twigs together more carefully, creating a stable base before adding smaller materials. It's not beautiful, but it holds together when tested. Over the next few days, you both work to improve the nest, adding comfort materials and reinforcing weak spots. Your mate seems satisfied with the final result, which is all that matters. Soon after, she lays 2 white eggs. They're small and fragile, and suddenly you understand the enormous responsibility you've taken on. These eggs contain your future offspring, and keeping them safe becomes your primary obsession. You and your mate take turns incubating the eggs, keeping them warm and protected. It's a delicate balance. Leave them too long and they'll get cold. Sit on them wrong, and you might crack the shells. Every movement requires careful consideration. The city doesn't care about your new responsibilities. Predators still hunt, weather still threatens, and food still needs to be found. But now you have something worth protecting, something that makes all the risks worthwhile. During your shifts away from the nest, you become even more focused and efficient. You can't waste time exploring or socializing. Every foraging trip needs to be successful because you're not just feeding yourself anymore. Your mate needs nutrition to produce healthy chicks, and soon those chicks will need constant feeding. You develop new hunting strategies, targeting more reliable food sources. Street vendors become your best friends. They're predictable, generous with scraps, and usually in the same location every day. You memorize their schedules, showing up just as they're setting up or cleaning up. After 18 days of careful incubation, the first egg starts to crack. You can hear tiny tapping sounds from inside as your chick works to break free. It's an exhausting process that takes hours, but eventually, a tiny beak breaks through the shell. Your first chick emerges wet, exhausted, and completely helpless. It's not much to look at, just a small bundle of wet fluff with enormous eyes and a constantly open mouth. But it's yours, and the surge of protective instinct you feel is overwhelming. The second chick hatches the next day, and suddenly your quiet nest becomes a demanding, noisy operation. Both chicks are constantly hungry, constantly squawking, and completely dependent on you and your mate for survival. Feeding baby pigeons is unlike anything you've experienced. They don't eat solid food. Instead, they need crop milk, a nutritious substance you produce in your digestive system. It's exhausting to make, but it's exactly what growing chicks need. You take turns with your mate, one staying at the nest while the other forages. The feeding schedule is relentless. Every few hours, day and night. You're constantly tired, constantly stressed, but also strangely fulfilled. This is what you were built for. The chicks grow incredibly fast. Within days, they're noticeably larger and more active. Their eyes open, their feathers start developing, and they begin to look less like tiny aliens and more like actual pigeons. But raising chicks in the city comes with constant dangers. Other pigeons sometimes raid nests, so stealing eggs or attacking chicks. Crows are even worse. They're smart enough to wait until both parents are away before striking. Xingxi, you learn to never leave the nest unguarded for long. Weather is another constant threat. Spring storms can flood nests or blow chicks out before they're ready to fly. You and your mate work together to shield your young from rain and wind, using your bodies as living umbrellas. As the chicks grow stronger, they become more demanding and more adventurous. They start testing their wings, flapping frantically while still in the nest. They crane their necks toward the edge, curious about the world beyond their small platform. You know what's coming next, and you're not ready for it. Soon, these chicks will need to leave the nest and learn to fly. The same terrifying leap you made months ago will be their introduction to the real world. Some chicks don't survive their first flight. The thought keeps you awake at night, but that's still days away. For now, you focus on the present, keeping your family fed, safe, and growing. Every successful day feels like a victory against impossible odds. The city continues its relentless pace around your small family drama. Cars rush past below, humans hurry along sidewalks, and other pigeons pursue their own struggles. But on your narrow ledge, time moves differently. Here, the only things that matter are two small lives, depending entirely on you. Your chicks are now 3 weeks old, and they're becoming more restless by the day. They've outgrown the confines of the nest, constantly bumping into each other and testing the limits of their small world. Their wings have developed proper flight feathers, and they spend hours flapping, building the muscle memory they'll need for their first real flight. You watch them with a mixture of pride and terror. They're strong and healthy, but the world below is unforgiving. Every day, you see evidence of what happens to careless pigeons. Feathers scattered on sidewalks, small bodies that didn't make it across busy streets. Your protective instincts scream at you to keep them safe in the nest forever, but nature has other plans. Your mate starts the process by landing on the nest with less food than usual. The chicks complain loudly, stretching their necks and demanding more. But she's not being cruel. She's preparing them for independence. Hungry chicks are motivated chicks, and motivation is what they'll need to take that first leap. The bravest chick makes the first move. It's been edging closer to the nest's rim for days, peering down at the world below with curious eyes. One morning, while you're away foraging, it happens. Your mate calls to you urgently, and you return to find only one chick in the nest. The other is perched on a fire escape 1 building over, looking stunned but triumphant. Your heart pounds as you fly over to check on your adventurous offspring. It's shaky on its feet, clearly exhausted from the effort, but it's alive and uninjured. The flight wasn't pretty. You can see where it scraped against the building's brick wall, but it worked. Your chick is now officially capable of independent movement. The second chick takes another 2 days to work up the courage. When it finally jumps, the landing is even worse than its siblings. It overshoots the intended target entirely and ends up in an alley, flapping frantically to avoid a curious cat. You and your mate dive bomb the predator until it loses interest and slinks away. Both chicks are now out of the nest, but they're far from independent. They follow you everywhere, begging for food and protection. Their flying skills are terrible. They crash into windows, misjudge distances, and generally look like they're trying to hurt themselves. Every outing feels like a disaster waiting to happen. Teaching them to find food is a frustrating process. You land near a promising pile of breadcrumbs and demonstrate the proper technique: quick pecks, constant vigilance, efficient swallowing. Your chicks watch intently, then immediately do everything wrong. They're too slow, too careless, and too trusting. Other pigeons push them aside and steal their food before they can react, but gradually they start to improve. The more aggressive chick learns to fight back when challenged, puffing up its feathers and making threatening noises. The more cautious one develops excellent observation skills, waiting until the competition thins out before making its move. You introduce them to the complex social dynamics of pigeon flocks. Every gathering of birds has unspoken rules about hierarchy, territory, and sharing. Newcomers need to prove themselves without being too aggressive. It's a delicate balance that takes time to master. Your chicks make plenty of mistakes. The aggressive one picks a fight with an older, more experienced pigeon and gets thoroughly dominated. The cautious one misses several good feeding opportunities because it's too afraid to approach. But each mistake is a lesson, and pigeons are quick learners when survival is on the line. After 6 weeks of intensive training, your chicks are ready for independence. They can fly competently, find food on their own, and avoid most obvious dangers. More importantly, they understand that the world is dangerous and that survival requires constant vigilance. The separation happens gradually. You start spending less time with them, forcing them to solve problems on their own. When they call for help, you ignore them unless they're in genuine danger. It's harder than you expected. Every instinct tells you to protect and provide, but independence is the greatest gift you can give them. One morning, you wake up and realize you haven't seen either chick for 3 days. They've moved on to establish their own territories, just as you did months ago. The nest feels empty and quiet, but there's also a sense of accomplishment. You've successfully raised the next generation. Your mate is already thinking about the next clutch. The breeding season isn't over, and pigeons can raise multiple broods in a single year if conditions are favorable. She's been eyeing the nest with renewed interest, and you know what that means. But before you commit to another round of parenting, you take some time to focus on yourself. The months of constant vigilance and feeding have taken their toll. Your feathers are worn, your energy is depleted, and you've lost weight from giving most of your food to the chicks. You spend the next few weeks rebuilding your strength. You return to your favorite feeding spots, reconnecting with the rhythms of city life. Without chicks to worry about, you can afford to be more adventurous in your foraging. You explore new neighborhoods, test different food sources, and even allow yourself some leisure time for dust baths and social preening. The city has changed slightly during your focused parenting phase. A new restaurant opened on your block, bringing new food opportunities. Construction started on a nearby building, creating both hazards and potential nesting sites. A family of cats moved into your territory, forcing you to adjust your routes and timing. You adapted to these changes with the flexibility that has kept pigeons thriving in cities worldwide. Every modification to your environment is both a challenge and an opportunity. The construction noise might be annoying, but construction workers are notoriously messy eaters. As summer progresses, you notice changes in your own behavior. You're more confident now, more assured in your movements and decisions. Successful parenthood has given you a new level of authority among local pigeons. Younger birds defer to you at feeding sites, and other adults treat you with increased respect. Your mate approaches you one day with a familiar look in her eyes. She's ready for another clutch, and she wants to know if you're willing to partner with her again. The decision isn't automatic. Pigeon pair bonds aren't necessarily permanent, and you could choose a different mate if you wanted, but your previous collaboration was successful. You work well together, sharing responsibilities and communicating effectively during stressful situations. Why change a winning formula? You agree to another round of nest building and egg incubation. This time, the process feels more routine. You know what to expect, what materials work best for construction, and how to divide the labor efficiently. The nest comes together quickly, and your mate lays 3 eggs instead of 2, a sign that she's in excellent health and condition. The incubation period passes more smoothly than before. You've learned to optimize your foraging routes, finding food faster and more efficiently. You know which humans are likely to share snacks, which areas are safest for quick feeding, and how to avoid the peak predator activity times. When the new chicks hatch, you're ready for them. The constant feeding demands don't seem as overwhelming because you know they're temporary. The sleep deprivation is manageable because you've experienced it before. Even the stress of protecting vulnerable young feels more controlled. But this clutch brings new challenges. 3 chicks instead of 2 means more competition within the nest, more food requirements, and more complex logistics when it comes time to teach flying. The nest, which seemed adequate for 2 chicks, feels cramped with 3 growing bodies. The chicks develop distinct personalities quickly. One is bold and aggressive, always pushing for the best position during feeding time. Another is cautious and observant, preferring to watch before acting. The third falls somewhere in between, adaptable and cooperative, but not particularly dominant. As they grow larger, space becomes a critical issue. The aggressive chick tries to push its siblings out of the nest prematurely, leading to squabbles that threaten everyone's safety. You and your mate have to intervene repeatedly, breaking up fights and enforcing some semblance of order. The fledgling process is more chaotic this time. The bold chick leaves first, but crashes spectacularly into a parked car, stunning itself temporarily. The cautious one refuses to leave until hunger finally forces the issue. The adaptable one waits until its siblings are gone, then makes a clean, competent first flight that puts the others to shame. Training 3 independent chicks simultaneously is exhausting. They scatter in different directions, pursue different interests, and require individual attention for their specific weaknesses. The aggressive one needs to learn restraint and patience. The cautious one needs confidence building. The adaptable one progresses fastest, but still requires guidance on advanced survival techniques. By the time this second brood achieves independence, you're physically and emotionally drained. 5 successful fledglings in 1 season is an impressive achievement, but it has cost you dearly. So your body weight has dropped significantly, and your feathers show signs of stress and poor nutrition. Your mate suggests a 3rd clutch, but you decline. Your instincts tell you that another round of breeding this season would be pushing your limits too far. Better to focus on survival and preparation for winter than to risk everything on one more reproductive attempt. She accepts your decision without argument. Successful breeding partnerships require mutual respect and understanding of limitations. Pushing too hard, too fast is a recipe for disaster that could cost both partners their lives. As autumn approaches, your priorities shift dramatically. The city's rhythm changes with the seasons, bringing new challenges and opportunities. Tourist season winds down, reducing the reliable food sources around hotels and attractions. Students return to school, changing the patterns of foot traffic and littering in your territory. But autumn also brings harvest festivals, outdoor markets, and increased human activity around food vendors. Apple season means dropped fruit in parks. Halloween candy means sugar-rich treats scattered on sidewalks. Thanksgiving preparation means increased bakery activity and more food waste. You adapt your routine to match these seasonal patterns. Your memory for location and timing becomes crucial as you navigate the shifting landscape of urban food sources. The skills you've developed over 2 years of city living serve you well as you prepare for the challenges ahead. Winter is coming, and with it, the hardest test of your survival skills. Food will become scarce, shelter will be at a premium, and every decision will carry increased weight. But you've learned, adapted, and thrived in this concrete jungle. You've raised offspring and contributed to the next generation. The city lights flicker on as evening falls, casting long shadows across the urban landscape. Somewhere in those shadows, your 5 chicks are beginning their own journeys, carrying forward the lessons you taught them. The cycle continues, as it has for generations of pigeons before you, and as it will for generations to come. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new tests of your adaptability. But tonight, you roost on your familiar perch, wings tucked against the growing chill, ready for whatever comes next. You are a survivor in the ultimate urban environment, and your story is far from over. Winter hits the city like a slap to the face, and suddenly everything you thought you knew about survival gets harder. The temperature drops, and with it goes most of your reliable food sources. Outdoor cafes close their patios. Street vendors disappear. Even the tourists, those wonderfully messy eaters, bundle up and hurry past without dropping so much as a crumb. Your first challenge is staying warm. That cozy ledge under the bridge that served as your childhood home now feels like an icebox. The wind cuts through your feathers, and no amount of fluffing helps. You need to find better shelter, but so does every other pigeon in the city. Competition for the best roosting spots becomes fierce. You discover that the heating vents outside office buildings are prime real estate. The warm air rising from these mechanical systems can mean the difference between surviving the night and freezing to death. But claiming one of these spots requires either getting there first or fighting for it. The older, more experienced pigeons know all the best locations, and they're not giving them up without a battle. Your first winter fight is brutal. An older male has claimed the perfect vent spot outside a department store, and you decide to challenge him for it. He's bigger than you, with scars across his beak that tell stories of previous battles. But you're younger and more desperate. The fight is quick and vicious. Feathers fly, claws scrape, and both of you end up bloodied. He wins, but barely. You retreat to a less desirable spot, nursing your wounds and planning your next move. Food becomes an obsession. The abundance of summer feels like a distant memory as you search frantically for anything edible. You learn to dig through snow to find buried scraps. You discover that some humans are more generous during the cold months, perhaps feeling sorry for the struggling wildlife around them. These sympathetic souls become your lifeline, and you memorize their faces, their routines, their favorite spots for feeding birds. But relying on human kindness is dangerous. One day, an elderly woman who's been feeding you regularly for weeks suddenly stops showing up. You wait for hours at her usual spot, growing weaker with hunger before accepting that she's not coming. Maybe she's sick, maybe she moved, maybe she died. It doesn't matter why. What matters is that you've lost a crucial food source and need to find alternatives fast. You start taking bigger risks. Garbage cans that you would have ignored in summer become treasure troves worth investigating. You learn to time your searches for just after collection When restaurant dumpsters are fullest, the food you find is often questionable: moldy bread, spoiled meat, scraps that other animals have already picked over. But questionable food is still food, and beggars can't be choosers. The cold affects your body in ways you didn't expect. Your metabolism slows down to conserve energy, making you feel sluggish and tired. Your joints ache, especially the old injuries from fights and crashes. Flying becomes more difficult as your muscles stiffen and you find yourself walking more often than you'd like. Walking makes you vulnerable to ground predators, but sometimes you don't have the energy for flight. Other pigeons start dying around you. You find their frozen bodies in alleyways and under bridges, stark reminders of what happens to birds that can't adapt quickly enough. Some are old, some are young, some are simply unlucky. Death in winter doesn't discriminate. You search their bodies for any remaining food scraps before moving on. Sentiment is a luxury you can't afford when survival is at stake. Your mate doesn't make it through January. You find her one morning beneath your old nesting site, her body rigid with cold. She'd been getting weaker for weeks, unable to compete effectively for food or shelter. You'd tried to share your finds with her, but it wasn't enough. Her death hits you harder than you expected. You'd shared 2 successful broods with her, faced dangers together, built something resembling a partnership. Now you're alone again. Grief is another luxury you can't afford. The same day you find her body, you're back to foraging, back to fighting for survival. But something inside you has changed. The loss makes you more cautious, more selective about risks. You've learned that winter can take anyone, anytime, and preparation becomes your obsession. February brings a brief warming spell that tricks you into thinking winter might be over. For 3 glorious days, the temperature rises above freezing, ice melts, and humans venture outside again. You gorge yourself on the sudden abundance of food, trying to rebuild the fat reserves that have kept you alive. But it's a false spring. The cold returns with a vengeance, and you're reminded never to trust the weather. By March, you're a different bird than you were in autumn. You've lost weight, gained scars, and developed a hardness that wasn't there before. Your reflexes are sharper, your instincts more finely tuned. You've survived your first winter in the city, and that achievement puts you in an exclusive club. Many pigeons don't make it through their first cold season. The fact that you did proves you have what it takes to be a long-term survivor. Spring arrives gradually, almost hesitantly, as if it's not sure winter is really gone. The first green shoots appear in parks, and humans begin emerging from their winter hibernation. Street vendors return to their corners, outdoor cafes reopen their patios, and the tourists start trickling back. The city slowly comes back to life, and with it, your food sources. But spring also brings new challenges. The other pigeons who survived winter are hungry, desperate, and ready to fight for territory. The best feeding spots and nesting locations become battlegrounds as everyone tries to establish dominance after months of mere survival. You're stronger now, more experienced, and you claim a better territory than you had before. Your hormones kick in again as the days grow longer and warmer. The urge to mate returns with surprising intensity. You've learned that partnership can be beneficial, but you've also learned that loss is inevitable. This time, you're more selective about potential mates. You want someone strong, someone who can survive whatever the city throws at them. You find her at a fountain in the financial district, a young female with bright eyes and pristine feathers. She's clearly inexperienced, probably on her first breeding season, but there's something about her alertness that impresses you. She notices threats quickly, moves efficiently, and doesn't waste energy on unnecessary displays, Courting her is different this time. You're more confident, more direct in your approach. Your displays are refined by experience. Your gift offerings carefully selected for maximum impact. When you present her with a fresh bagel half that you fought 3 other pigeons to claim, she accepts it immediately. Your pair bond forms quickly and naturally. The nest you build together is your masterpiece. You've learned from previous mistakes, selecting materials more carefully and constructing with greater skill. The location is perfect, sheltered from wind and rain, hidden from predators, but with easy access to feeding areas. Your mate contributes equally to the construction, and together you create something that's both functional and sturdy. This time, she lays 4 eggs. Your experience as a parent serves you well during the incubation period. You know how to optimize foraging trips, how to share responsibilities effectively, and how to protect your investment without exhausting yourself. The process feels less frantic, more controlled. When the chicks hatch, you're ready for them. 4 hungry mouths are demanding, but manageable. You've developed efficient feeding techniques and know where to find the most nutritious food quickly. Your mate proves to be an excellent partner, sharing the workload without complaint and showing natural parenting instincts. The chicks grow rapidly under your combined care. You teach them the lessons you've learned through hard experience, which humans to approach, which predators to avoid, how to read the subtle signs that indicate danger or opportunity. Your survival knowledge becomes their foundation for future success, but raising 4 chicks attracts attention you don't want. A crow discovers your nest location and begins stalking your family. Crows are intelligent, patient, and absolutely ruthless when it comes to raiding other birds' nests. This one watches your routines, learning when the nest is most vulnerable. The attack comes when you're both away foraging. You return to find the crow in your nest, one of your chicks already dead, the others scattered and terrified. Rage floods your system as you dive at the intruder, your mate joining the assault. The crow is bigger and stronger, but you're fighting for your offspring. The battle is vicious, with all 3 birds sustaining injuries before the crow finally retreats. You manage to gather your 3 surviving chicks back to the nest, but the damage is done. They're traumatized, and your perfect nesting site has been compromised. The crow knows where you are now, and it will return. You make the difficult decision to abandon the nest and relocate your family. Moving 3 partially grown chicks is a nightmare. They can't fly yet, but they're too big to carry safely. You and your mate take turns transporting them one by one to a new location several blocks away. The process takes hours and leaves everyone exhausted, but you manage to establish a new, more secure nest. The trauma bonds your family in ways you didn't expect. The surviving chicks become more attentive, more obedient, more aware of dangers. They learn faster and take fewer unnecessary risks. In a way, the crow attack, devastating as it was, may have improved their chances of long-term survival. When fledging time arrives, these chicks are better prepared than your previous broods. Their first flights are more controlled, their landings more precise. They've absorbed the lessons of constant vigilance, and it shows in their behavior. They stay closer to cover, check for threats more frequently, and respond immediately to alarm calls. Training them is easier because they're motivated by genuine understanding of danger rather than just instinct. They've seen what happens when vigilance lapses, and they don't want to be victims. By the time they achieve independence, you're confident they have the skills and mindset necessary for urban survival. Your mate suggests another clutch, but you decline again. 3 successful broods in 2 years, with 7 surviving offspring, is an impressive legacy. More importantly, you've established yourself as one of the dominant pigeons in your territory. Other birds defer to your experience and proven success. Summer passes peacefully as you focus on maintaining your position and preparing for the coming winter. You know what to expect now: the gradual reduction in food sources, the competition for shelter, the daily struggle against cold and hunger. But you also know you can survive it because you've done it before. Your territory has expanded to include several prime feeding locations and multiple shelter options. You've memorized the schedules of dozens of humans who regularly provide food, either intentionally or accidentally. Your mental map of the city includes safe routes, danger zones, and seasonal variations in resource availability. You've become a master of urban adaptation, but the city continues to evolve around you. New construction projects alter familiar landscapes. Businesses close and open, changing the patterns of human activity. Even the weather seems different from year to year, bringing unexpected challenges and opportunities. One autumn day, you notice something wrong with your vision. Objects that should be sharp appear fuzzy, and you find yourself misjudging distances. At first, you assume it's fatigue or poor lighting, but the problem persists. Your eyesight, crucial for survival in the dangerous urban environment, is starting to fail. The deterioration is gradual but noticeable. You compensate by relying more heavily on your other senses: hearing, smell, and the subtle vibrations that indicate approaching threats. You become more cautious in your movements, taking fewer risks and staying closer to familiar territory. Other pigeons begin to notice your vulnerability. Younger, stronger birds start challenging your dominance at feeding sites. You can still fight when necessary, but your reactions are slower, your accuracy diminished. The social hierarchy that you worked years to establish begins to shift as others sense weakness. You adapt by changing your strategies. Instead of competing directly with aggressive younger birds, you focus on efficiency and knowledge. You know where to find food when the obvious sources are crowded. You understand human behavior well enough to predict when and where opportunities will arise. Experience becomes your competitive advantage, but age is relentless. Your joints ache more frequently, especially during cold weather. Your feathers don't seem as waterproof as they once were, and you find yourself getting chilled more easily. Flying, once effortless, now requires conscious effort and planning. One winter morning, you wake up feeling different. Something fundamental has shifted in your body during the night. Moving is difficult, breathing requires effort, and the world seems distant and unclear. You know what this means. You've seen it in other birds before. Your body is finally giving out after years of urban warfare. You spend your last day visiting the places that defined your life. The bridge where you were born, though the original nest is long gone. The fountain where you met your mates. The buildings where you raised your broods. Each location holds memories of struggles overcome, battles won, offspring successfully launched into independence. As evening approaches, you find yourself back where it all began, on a ledge beneath the bridge, listening to the familiar rumble of traffic overhead. Your vision is almost gone now, but you don't need to see to remember. You can recall every detail of your journey, from helpless chick to successful adult, from desperate survival to confident mastery. The city lights flicker on around you as consciousness fades. Cars continue their endless rush across the bridge above. Humans hurry along sidewalks below, and other pigeons begin their evening roost. Life in the city goes on, just as it did before you existed, and just as it will after you're gone. But you've left your mark. 7 offspring carry your genes and your lessons forward into the future. The territory you claimed and defended will be inherited by birds who learned from your example. The complex ecosystem of urban wildlife has been shaped in small but meaningful ways by your presence. Your body will be found by a maintenance worker the next morning and disposed of without ceremony. There will be no monuments, no memorials, no recognition of the remarkable life you lived. But that was never the point. The point was survival, adaptation, and contribution to the continuation of your species. In the grand scheme of the city, you were just another pigeon. But in the smaller world of your territory, your family, your daily struggles and victories, you were everything. You were proof that intelligence, adaptability, and determination can overcome almost any obstacle. You were a survivor in the ultimate test of survival, life in the modern city. And somewhere in the urban landscape, your offspring are beginning their own stories, carrying forward the lessons you taught them, adding their own experiences to the collective wisdom of city pigeons. The cycle continues, as it has for generations and as it will for generations to come, each bird building on the success of those who came before. Your story ends here, but the larger story of urban adaptation, of wildlife thriving in human-dominated environments, of intelligence finding ways to exploit every available niche, continues. You are part of something bigger than yourself, a living example of nature's incredible ability to adapt, survive, and thrive, no matter what challenges arise. The city never sleeps, and neither do its dangers. Your offspring face challenges you never had to deal with, and some of them don't make it. The aggressive chick from your first brood gets hit by a delivery truck while competing for a dropped sandwich. The cautious one from your second clutch starves during a particularly harsh winter, too afraid to take the risks necessary for survival. But the others adapt, learn, and thrive. Your bold chick from the third brood becomes a legend in its own right. It claims territory in the busiest part of downtown, where food is abundant, but competition is fierce. It learns to exploit the chaos of rush hour, diving between the legs of hurried commuters to snatch dropped breakfast items. Its fearlessness serves it well, and it successfully raises multiple broods of its own. The adaptable chick develops a different strategy entirely. It discovers that construction sites offer unique opportunities. Workers who eat lunch on scaffolding, heavy machinery that disturbs insects, and temporary structures perfect for nesting. It becomes a specialist in exploiting these temporary resources, moving from site to site as projects complete. Your cautious offspring finds its niche around hospitals and retirement homes, where the pace is slower and humans are more likely to feed birds intentionally. It develops relationships with specific staff members who save breadcrumbs from their lunches. The approach is less dramatic than its siblings, but equally effective. Each of your surviving children develops its own territory, its own strategies, its own solutions to the endless puzzle of urban survival. They remember the lessons you taught them, but they adapt those lessons to their own personalities and circumstances. This is how evolution works, not through dramatic changes, but through countless small adaptations that accumulate over generations. The city itself continues evolving around them. New buildings rise, old ones fall. Traffic patterns shift as roads are rebuilt. Human behavior changes with technology. Fewer people carry cash, so less change falls from pockets, but food delivery increases, creating new scavenging opportunities. Your bloodline spreads through the urban ecosystem. Grandchildren you'll never meet inherit your genes and your descendants' learned behaviors. Some carry your boldness, others your caution, all of them carrying forward the fundamental lesson you learned through hard experience. Adaptability is everything. Climate change brings new challenges that even you never faced. Summers become hotter, forcing pigeons to seek shade and water more desperately. Winters become more unpredictable, warm spells followed by sudden freezes that catch everyone off guard. The birds that survive are those flexible enough to adjust their routines rapidly. Your great-grandchildren face challenges that would seem impossible to previous generations. Food packaging becomes more secure, reducing accidental spills. Pest control methods become more sophisticated, targeting the insects that pigeons depend on. Building designs change to discourage nesting, forcing birds to become even more creative in their site selection. But pigeons are remarkably resilient. What humans see as pest control, pigeons see as puzzles to solve. Every new obstacle becomes an opportunity for innovation. The species that survived ice ages and continental drift can certainly handle human attempts at population control. New predators arrive in the city as urban wildlife expands. Peregrine falcons nest on skyscrapers, using the concrete canyons like natural cliff faces. Red-tailed hawks establish territories in parks and green spaces. These aerial predators force pigeons to develop new evasion techniques, new awareness patterns, new survival strategies. But pigeons have advantages that wild prey species lack. They understand human behavior in ways that other birds don't. They know which humans represent threats and which represent opportunities. They can distinguish between a person carrying food and a person carrying pest control equipment. This psychological insight becomes their greatest defensive tool. The urban environment continues to select for intelligence, adaptability, and boldness. Stupid pigeons don't survive to reproduce. Inflexible pigeons can't adjust to changing conditions. Timid pigeons miss opportunities and lose out in competition. The city is a harsh but effective teacher, constantly weeding out traits that don't contribute to survival. Your genetic legacy becomes part of this ongoing selection process. The boldness that helped you claim territory gets passed down to birds that use it to exploit new food sources. The caution that kept you alive through dangerous situations helps your descendants avoid novel urban threats. The adaptability that let you thrive in changing conditions becomes a family trademark. Years pass, and your direct influence fades into the background. The pigeons that now populate your old territory have no memory of you, no knowledge of the bird who first claimed and defended these feeding grounds. But they benefit from the precedents you set, the paths you established, the solutions you discovered through trial and error. The city's pigeon population stabilizes at a level the environment can support. Food sources, nesting sites, and shelter options create natural limits on how many birds can successfully reproduce. Competition ensures that only the most capable individuals pass their genes to the next generation. Human attitudes toward pigeons remain complicated, so some people love feeding them, seeing them as symbols of urban wildlife and natural resilience. Others hate them, viewing them as flying rats that create mess and spread disease. Most humans simply ignore them, accepting their presence as an inevitable part of city life. This indifference actually works in pigeons' favor. Animals that humans actively hunt face much greater pressure than those that are merely tolerated. As long as pigeons don't become enough of a problem to trigger serious control efforts, they can continue exploiting urban resources relatively freely. New technologies create both threats and opportunities. Smartphone apps help humans identify and report pest problems, but they also create new sources of dropped food as people become distracted by their devices. Automated systems monitor bird populations, but they also generate data that helps scientists understand urban wildlife needs. Your story becomes part of a larger narrative about adaptation and survival in human-dominated environments. Across the globe, countless species are learning to live alongside humans, exploiting urban resources, and evolving new behaviors to thrive in artificial environments. Some succeed spectacularly. Urban coyotes become more intelligent and adaptable than their rural cousins. City-dwelling raccoons develop problem-solving skills that would impress researchers. Peregrine falcons use skyscrapers as hunting platforms, becoming more successful in cities than in their original habitat. Others fail completely. Species that can't adapt to human proximity disappear from urban areas, retreating to increasingly fragmented natural habitats. The animals that remain are those flexible enough to see opportunity where others see only obstacles. Pigeons represent one of evolution's greatest success stories in urban adaptation. They've taken a species originally adapted to rocky cliffs and coastal environments and transformed it into the ultimate city dweller. Every behavior, every instinct, every survival strategy has been refined through generations of urban selection pressure. Your individual contribution to this ongoing evolutionary experiment was significant but temporary. You proved that intelligence and adaptability could overcome the challenges of city life. You demonstrated successful reproductive strategies. You passed beneficial traits to offspring who carried them forward into new challenges. The bridge where you were born still stands, though it's been renovated several times since your childhood. New generations of pigeons nest in the same crevices, face the same traffic noise, deal with the same human activity. The specific birds change, but the challenges remain remarkably consistent. If you could somehow observe the current pigeon population in your old territory, you'd recognize familiar patterns. Young birds making the same mistakes you made, adult birds employing strategies similar to yours, flocks gathering at the same reliable food sources, roosting in the same sheltered locations, following routes you helped establish. But you'd also notice innovations, new techniques developed by subsequent generations, novel solutions to problems that emerged after your time, adaptations to changing urban conditions that required fresh thinking. Progress in urban wildlife isn't about individual brilliance. It's about collective learning passed down through generations. The evolutionary pressure never stops. Each year brings new challenges that test pigeon adaptability. Climate change, urban development, human behavior modifications, new predators, novel diseases. The city constantly presents fresh obstacles that require creative solutions. Your descendants face these challenges with the same combination of instinct and intelligence that served you well. They inherit your genes, but they also inherit the accumulated wisdom of all the pigeons that came before. Each generation builds on previous successes while developing new responses to unprecedented situations. This is the true measure of your legacy, not individual recognition, but contribution to an ongoing process of adaptation and survival. You are part of something larger than yourself, a living example of nature's incredible ability to evolve and thrive in the face of constant change. The city continues its relentless growth and transformation, but pigeons continue to find ways to exploit every new opportunity. Construction sites become temporary feeding grounds. Food trucks create mobile banquets. Outdoor dining areas generate predictable scrap sources. Every human innovation becomes a potential pigeon advantage. Your story exemplifies the broader story of urban wildlife, animals that refuse to be displaced by human development and instead found ways to benefit from it. You turned human carelessness into opportunity, human structures into habitat, human schedules into predictable resource availability. The concrete jungle you mastered continues to evolve, but the fundamental principles you learned remain valid. Intelligence matters. Adaptability is essential. Persistence pays off. Cooperation can be beneficial. Risk assessment is crucial. These lessons transcend species and circumstances. Modern pigeons face challenges you never encountered, but they approach them with strategies refined through generations of urban living. They stand on the foundation of knowledge built by countless predecessors, each contributing their own discoveries to the collective understanding of city survival. Your genetic material continues circulating through the urban pigeon population, mixed and recombined with that of countless other successful survivors. The specific combination of traits that made you successful may never appear again in exactly the same form, but elements of your success story live on in new configurations. This is how evolution works, not through preservation of individuals, but through preservation and refinement of successful strategies. Your boldness lives on in birds that take calculated risks. Your caution lives on in birds that properly assess dangers. Your adaptability lives on in birds that adjust to changing conditions. The city pigeons of today are the products of millions of individual success stories, like yours. Each bird that survived to reproduce contributed something valuable to the gene pool. Each successful adaptation became part of the species' toolkit for urban survival. Your story ends with death, as all individual stories must. But the larger story you were part of continues, carried forward by descendants who face new challenges with old wisdom, who build on past successes while innovating for future survival. In that continuation, in that endless adaptation to an ever-changing world, your true immortality lies. The city changes around your descendants in ways you never could have imagined. Glass towers stretch higher into the sky, creating wind tunnels that require new flight patterns. LED lights replace older bulbs, changing the nighttime landscape and affecting roosting behavior. Even the humans move differently now, heads buried in glowing screens, creating new opportunities and hazards. Your great-great-grandchildren navigate this transformed landscape with skills that build on everything you learned. They've inherited your wariness of cats, but now they also know to avoid the silent electric vehicles that replaced many of the rumbling cars you knew. They've kept your knowledge of human feeding patterns, but adapted it to account for food delivery services and outdoor dining restrictions. The concrete beneath their feet tells stories of countless pigeons who came before, scratches in the stone-marked territories, claimed and lost. Stains on building ledges show where generations of birds have roosted. Every surface in the city bears invisible traces of the struggles that shaped pigeon behavior over decades. Weather patterns shift in ways that test every adaptation your species has developed. Heat waves arrive with brutal intensity, forcing birds to seek shade in places they never needed before. Flash floods turn familiar streets into dangerous rivers. Snow falls when it shouldn't, catching everyone unprepared for winter survival techniques in spring. Your descendants respond with the same flexibility you showed, but applied to problems you never faced. They learn to use water features in new ways during extreme heat. They discover that certain building materials stay cooler than others. They figure out which humans are most likely to provide water during droughts, not just food during plenty. The evolution continues, invisible but relentless. Birds that can't handle temperature extremes don't survive to breed. Those that find innovative cooling or warming strategies pass those behaviors to their offspring. Natural selection operates as efficiently in the modern city as it did in your time, just with different pressures. New predators establish themselves in urban environments. Owls discover that city lighting makes night hunting easier than ever. Hawks learn that tall buildings provide perfect perches for surveying potential prey. Even domestic cats become more sophisticated hunters as they adapt to apartment living. But pigeons adapt too. Your descendants develop better night vision to spot approaching owls. They learn the hunting patterns of urban hawks and adjust their daily routines accordingly. They recognize the difference between well-fed house cats and hungry strays, responding appropriately to each threat level. Competition for resources intensifies as the city's wildlife population grows more diverse. Crows become more aggressive in defending food sources. Sparrows multiply and compete for the same nesting sites. Even rats, those fellow urban survivors, sometimes conflict with pigeons over shelter and scraps. Your genetic legacy helps your descendants navigate these crowded conditions. The social skills you developed for flock dynamics prove essential when dealing with mixed species competitions. The territorial instincts that served you well help your offspring claim and defend valuable resources against increasingly diverse rivals. Human technology creates unexpected challenges. Automated sprinkler systems activate at unpredictable times, soaking birds that thought they'd found safe roosting spots. Motion sensors trigger lights and sounds that startle feeding flocks. Even smartphone cameras change human behavior as people become more likely to photograph urban wildlife instead of simply ignoring it. But technology also creates opportunities. Security cameras malfunction and drip water during heat waves. Solar panels warm building surfaces, creating comfortable roosting spots. Automated food vendors occasionally malfunction, dispensing free meals for clever birds who learn to trigger the glitches. Your descendants inherit your ability to see opportunity in change. They don't resist technological advancement, they exploit it. Motion sensors become early warning systems for approaching threats. Automated systems provide predictable schedules for resource availability. Even hostile technologies, like bird deterrence, become puzzles to solve rather than insurmountable obstacles. The city's human population continues evolving too. New generations of people grow up with different attitudes toward urban wildlife. Some are more environmentally conscious, deliberately creating bird-friendly spaces. Others are more urbanized, viewing any wild animal as out of place in their concrete world. Your descendants learn to read these changing human attitudes as skillfully as you learned to read individual behavior. They identify which neighborhoods welcome birds and which consider them pests. They adapt their visibility accordingly, staying hidden in hostile areas while boldly approaching in friendly ones. Food sources continue shifting as human eating habits change. Fast food becomes healthier, reducing the fat content of dropped scraps. Organic movements eliminate many preservatives that helped food scraps last longer. Plant-based diets change the nutritional profile of available waste, requiring digestive adaptations. But pigeons prove remarkably flexible in their dietary requirements. Your descendants learn to extract nutrition from new types of food waste. They develop preferences for different grain varieties as availability changes. They even learn to supplement their diets with insects and small invertebrates when traditional food sources become unreliable. Urban development patterns shift towards sustainability, creating unexpected challenges and benefits for city wildlife. Green roofs provide new habitat but require different nesting strategies. Rain gardens create temporary water sources but flood unpredictably. Solar panel installations reduce available perching space while creating new microclimates. Your offspring adapt to these green initiatives with the same creativity you showed. They learn which planted areas provide food versus mere decoration. They discover that sustainable buildings often have better insulation, creating warmer roosting conditions. They even learn to use rain collection systems as reliable water sources. Climate becomes increasingly unpredictable, testing every survival strategy pigeons have developed. Seasons arrive earlier or later than expected. Temperature swings become more extreme. Weather patterns that were once reliable become chaotic and dangerous. Your descendants respond by becoming more flexible in their seasonal behaviors. They don't rely on calendar dates for breeding decisions, instead responding to actual environmental conditions. They maintain multiple backup plans for food and shelter, switching strategies as conditions change. They develop better weather prediction skills, reading subtle environmental cues to anticipate sudden changes. The urban ecosystem becomes more complex as other species successfully adapt to city life. Deer wander through suburban neighborhoods. Coyotes establish territories in parks. Even bears occasionally venture into urban areas, creating chaos that affects all city wildlife. Your genetic legacy helps your descendants navigate this crowded ecosystem. The alertness you developed for avoiding predators serves them well when dealing with larger urban wildlife. The social intelligence you used for flock coordination helps them understand the behavior patterns of unfamiliar species. Disease pressures change as urban wildlife populations grow denser. New pathogens emerge from the mixing of wild and domestic animals. Stress from overcrowding weakens immune systems. Even pollution affects disease resistance in ways that weren't apparent during your lifetime. But pigeons possess remarkable disease resistance, refined through generations of urban living. Your descendants inherit immune systems tested by countless urban pathogens. They've learned behaviors that minimize disease transmission while maintaining social cohesion. They can recognize and avoid sick individuals without abandoning beneficial flock behaviors. Human attitudes toward urban wildlife management become more sophisticated. Instead of simple extermination, cities implement complex population control strategies. Birth control for urban animals becomes common. Habitat modification attempts to influence wildlife behavior without killing animals. Your descendants face these management efforts with inherited wariness and intelligence. They learn to recognize and avoid baited birth control programs. They adapt to habitat modifications by finding alternative resources. They even learn to exploit management efforts, gathering at sites where competing species are being controlled. The pace of urban change accelerates beyond anything you experienced. Buildings rise and fall within single pigeon lifetimes. Neighborhoods transform completely in just a few years. Traffic patterns shift overnight as new technologies are implemented. The only constant becomes change itself. Your offspring thrive in this accelerated environment because they inherited your adaptability. They don't become attached to specific locations or strategies. They treat every change as a potential opportunity rather than a threat. They maintain the flexibility that allowed you to succeed in an ever-changing urban landscape. Air quality fluctuates as cities implement new pollution controls while dealing with increased population density. Some days bring cleaner air than you ever experienced. Other days bring pollution levels that challenge even pigeon respiratory systems. The variation becomes another factor, requiring constant adaptation. Your descendants develop enhanced sensitivity to air quality changes. They learn to recognize pollution patterns and adjust their activity accordingly. They discover which areas of the city have better air quality at different times of day. They even modify their flight patterns to avoid the worst pollution corridors. Noise pollution increases as urban density grows, but it becomes more varied and complex. The simple traffic noise you knew gets layered with construction sounds, electronic beeps, aircraft noise, and human activity. The acoustic environment becomes a constantly shifting challenge for communication and threat detection, but pigeons adapt their communication systems to cut through urban noise. Your descendants develop new call variations that penetrate different types of background sound. They learn to use visual signals more extensively when vocal communication becomes difficult. They even exploit certain urban sounds as camouflage for their own activities. Light pollution transforms the urban night in ways that affect all nocturnal behavior. Street lighting becomes brighter and more widespread. Electronic displays add moving lights to the static urban glow. Even residential areas become significantly brighter as security lighting proliferates. Your offspring adapt their sleep patterns to these changing light conditions. They learn to find darker roosting spots in an increasingly bright city. They adjust their internal clocks to account for artificial lighting that confuses natural circadian rhythms. They even learn to exploit certain artificial lights for warmth during cold nights. Urban water sources become more controlled and less predictable. Natural water features disappear under development. Fountains operate on timers rather than continuously. Even puddles become less common as drainage systems improve. Finding reliable water becomes a significant daily challenge. Your descendants develop water-finding skills that surpass anything you needed. They learn to predict when and where temporary water sources will appear. They discover that certain building maintenance activities create reliable water access. They even learn to exploit air conditioning condensation and other mechanical water sources. The social dynamics of urban pigeon populations become more complex as density increases and resources become more contested. Flock hierarchies become more rigid. Territory boundaries become more important. Individual relationships require more sophisticated management. Your genetic contribution to this social evolution proves valuable. The diplomatic skills you developed for managing mate relationships help your descendants navigate complex flock politics. The territorial instincts that served you in claiming resources help them establish position in crowded communities. The parenting strategies you perfected help them raise offspring in increasingly competitive environments. Urban predator populations stabilize at new levels, creating consistent but intense pressure on all prey species. Hawks and owls become permanent fixtures in city ecosystems rather than occasional visitors. Domestic cats multiply and become more effective hunters. Even urban mammals like foxes and raccoons compete for some of the same resources pigeons depend on. Your descendants face this predator pressure with inherited wariness, refined by generations of urban survival. They maintain the vigilance you developed while adding new threat recognition skills. They perfect the escape techniques you learned while developing new ones for unfamiliar predators. They balance the social benefits of flock living against the increased visibility that attracts predators. Human urban planning increasingly considers wildlife impacts, but not always in ways that benefit pigeons. Bird-friendly building designs might favor other species while making life harder for pigeons. Urban green spaces might be designed for aesthetics rather than wildlife utility. Even well-intentioned wildlife management sometimes works against pigeon interests, but your offspring inherit your ability to find opportunity in any situation. They learn to exploit bird-friendly features even when they weren't designed for pigeons. They discover that wildlife corridors intended for other species can provide new movement routes. They even learn to benefit from habitat improvements intended to support different types of urban wildlife. The economic pressures that shape cities continue affecting wildlife indirectly. Recession periods reduce food waste while increasing human tolerance for urban animals. Prosperity periods bring more food opportunities, but also more aggressive pest control efforts. Even global economic trends eventually influence local conditions for urban wildlife. Your descendants navigate these economic cycles with the same opportunism you showed. They learn to recognize the signs of changing economic conditions and adjust their strategies accordingly. They maintain flexibility in their resource utilization, never becoming completely dependent on any single food source or shelter type. They preserve the ability to exploit sudden opportunities while maintaining caution about temporary abundance. Technology integration accelerates, creating urban environments that would seem alien to the city you knew. Smart city systems monitor everything from traffic flow to air quality. Automated systems control lighting, water features, and even food waste management. The urban environment becomes increasingly responsive and unpredictable. Your offspring adapt to this technological landscape with inherited intelligence enhanced by each generation's learning. They learn to predict the behavior of automated systems. They discover how to trigger beneficial responses from smart city infrastructure. They even learn to avoid detection by monitoring systems when necessary. Climate adaptation becomes a crucial survival skill as weather extremes intensify. Heat domes create temperatures that challenge even adapted urban wildlife. Polar vortex events bring cold that penetrates traditional shelter. Storm systems arrive with unprecedented intensity, destroying habitat and disrupting food sources. Your descendants face these climate challenges with the same flexibility you showed in adapting to seasonal changes. They develop better heat tolerance through behavioral and physiological adaptations. They learn to find effective shelter during extreme weather events. They maintain the ability to rapidly adjust their strategies as climate patterns shift. The urban ecosystem reaches new levels of complexity as multiple species successfully adapt to city life. Competition intensifies not just between pigeons, but among all urban wildlife for the same basic resources. Cooperation sometimes emerges between species that find mutual benefit in shared activities. Your genetic legacy helps your descendants navigate this complex multi-species environment. The social intelligence you developed for pigeon interactions proves valuable when dealing with other urban animals. The resource assessment skills you perfected help them identify opportunities in crowded ecological niches. The behavioral flexibility you demonstrated allows them to adjust to new interspecies dynamics. Urban agriculture emerges as cities try to improve sustainability, creating new food sources, but also new conflicts with wildlife. Rooftop gardens provide fresh plant materials, but require defense against hungry birds. Community gardens offer foraging opportunities, but attract human efforts at pest control. Even vertical farming systems occasionally provide access to fresh food sources. Your offspring learn to exploit these agricultural developments while avoiding the associated risks. They discover which crops provide the best nutrition and when they're most accessible. They learn to recognize which agricultural areas tolerate wildlife presence and which respond aggressively to animal intrusion. They develop strategies for accessing plant-based food sources that complement their traditional urban diet. Transportation systems continue evolving in ways that affect all urban wildlife. Electric vehicles should change the acoustic environment while creating new hazards for animals accustomed to hearing approaching cars. Autonomous vehicles behave differently than human-driven cars, requiring new avoidance strategies. Even public transportation changes create new challenges and opportunities for urban animals. Your descendants adapt their traffic navigation skills to these technological changes. They learn to recognize the different movement patterns of autonomous vehicles. They adjust their acoustic warning systems to account for quieter electric motors. They discover new opportunities created by changing transportation infrastructure while avoiding the new hazards. Urban waste management becomes more sophisticated, reducing some food sources while creating others. Automated garbage collection changes the timing of food availability. Recycling programs alter the composition of waste streams. Even composting initiatives change the types of organic matter available to urban wildlife, but pigeons prove remarkably adaptable to changing waste streams. Your descendants learn to exploit new waste management systems for food access. They adjust their foraging schedules to match automated collection times. They even learn to distinguish between waste types that provide nutrition and those that should be avoided. The story of urban pigeon evolution continues with each generation, building on the foundation you helped establish. Your individual contribution becomes part of a larger narrative about adaptation, survival, and success in human-dominated environments. The specific strategies you developed may become obsolete, but the underlying principles of flexibility, intelligence, and persistence remain as relevant as ever. Your descendants face challenges you never imagined, but they approach them with inherited wisdom, refined by countless generations of urban living. They stand on the shoulders of every successful pigeon that came before, including you, as they continue the endless process of adaptation to an ever-changing world. The city that was once your entire universe has become just one part of a global network of urban environments where pigeons have learned to thrive. The lessons learned in your concrete jungle influence pigeon behavior in cities around the world. The success strategies developed in your territory become part of the species' global toolkit for urban survival. Your legacy extends far beyond your immediate offspring to encompass the entire phenomenon of urban wildlife adaptation. You are part of one of evolution's most remarkable success stories, the transformation of a cliff-dwelling species into the ultimate urban survivor. Your individual story of struggle, adaptation, and success represents the larger story of nature's incredible ability to find opportunity in the most unlikely places. In the end, your life exemplified the fundamental truth about survival in urban environments. Success comes not from resisting change, but from embracing it, learning from it, and finding ways to benefit from it. You proved that intelligence, flexibility, and determination can overcome almost any obstacle, even in the harsh concrete jungle of the modern city. The pigeons flying through your old territory today carry forward that legacy of successful adaptation. They face new challenges with old wisdom, building on past successes while innovating for future survival. In their continued success, in their ongoing adaptation to an ever-changing urban world, your true immortality lies, not in individual memory, but in the contribution you made to one of nature's greatest survival stories. Your world grows smaller as age takes its toll. The territory you once patrolled with confidence becomes harder to navigate. Younger pigeons push into your feeding spots, and you lack the energy to fight them off effectively. Your responses are slower, your landings less precise. The reflexes that once saved your life now hesitate just long enough to let opportunities slip away. You adapt by becoming more strategic about when and where you forage. Early morning offers fewer competitors, and you know which locations provide easy pickings before the crowds arrive. Your decades of experience become your greatest asset as physical abilities decline. You understand human patterns better than any younger bird, and that knowledge keeps you fed when raw competition would leave you hungry. The winter hits harder this time. Your third winter should be manageable with your experience, but your body doesn't recover from cold nights like it used to. Your feathers seem thinner, less effective at trapping warm air. The fat reserves that once sustained you through lean periods now take longer to build up and disappear more quickly. You find yourself seeking out the warmest possible roosting spots, even if they're not the safest or most comfortable. A heating vent behind a restaurant becomes your preferred overnight shelter, despite the constant noise and occasional disturbance from kitchen staff. Warmth matters more than peace when survival is at stake. Other pigeons your age are disappearing. Birds you've known for years simply don't show up at familiar feeding spots anymore. The harsh mathematics of urban wildlife become increasingly personal as your generation thins out. Every morning you wake up is a small victory against odds that grow longer each day. Your appetite changes as your metabolism slows. Foods that once energized you now seem to sit heavily in your crop. You become pickier about what you eat, not from luxury but from necessity. Your digestive system can't process low-quality scraps as efficiently as before, so you focus on finding the most nutritious options available. The social dynamics of pigeon flocks shift around your changing status. Younger birds no longer see you as a threat to be challenged or a competitor to be feared. Instead, they often ignore you entirely, treating you as irrelevant to their territorial disputes and mating displays. The invisibility stings, but it also provides a kind of protection from conflicts you can no longer win. You develop new relationships with humans who notice your condition. An elderly man who feeds pigeons in the park starts recognizing you specifically, often throwing extra bread in your direction. A maintenance worker at your favorite roosting building stops shooing you away, perhaps understanding that you're no longer capable of causing much trouble. These small kindnesses become crucial to your survival. The extra food helps maintain your declining body weight. The tolerance allows you to rest in spots that younger, more energetic birds might be driven away from. You learn to time your appearances to coincide with these sympathetic humans, maximizing the benefit of their generosity. Your memory remains sharp even as your body weakens. You can still navigate the city's complex layout, remembering not just current conditions, but how locations have changed over the years. This historical knowledge becomes valuable when familiar food sources disappear and you need to recall alternatives that worked in the past. Sleep becomes more important and more elusive. Your aging body needs more rest, but urban noise and activity make deep sleep difficult. You learn to take short naps throughout the day, conserving energy whenever possible. The luxury of extended sleep periods becomes something you remember from younger days when security felt more assured. Your flying patterns change to accommodate reduced stamina. You plan routes more carefully, using thermal currents and building updrafts to minimize energy expenditure. Long flights become rare, replaced by shorter hops between known resources. You sacrifice range for efficiency, accepting a smaller territory in exchange for manageable energy demands. The city continues changing around you, but your ability to adapt to new conditions diminishes. Construction projects that once represented opportunities now seem like obstacles too complex to navigate. New human behaviors that younger pigeons exploit quickly become puzzles you lack the energy to solve. Innovation gives way to reliance on proven strategies. Your relationship with weather becomes more critical as your tolerance for extremes decreases. Light rain that once barely affected your activities now sends you seeking immediate shelter. Temperature swings that you previously ignored now require careful planning and preparation. You become a student of microclimates, seeking out the most protected and comfortable spots. Predators sense your vulnerability in ways they never did before. Hawks that once flew past without interest now give you appraising looks. Cats that previously focused on younger, more active prey Start paying attention to your movements. You compensate by staying closer to cover and avoiding exposed areas where you once foraged confidently. Your social interactions with other pigeons become more limited but also more meaningful. The few birds your age who remain become familiar companions, sharing information about food sources and safe roosting spots. These relationships lack the intensity of mating partnerships or territorial rivalries, but they provide comfort and practical benefit. You witness the success of your offspring and their descendants as they establish themselves in the urban ecosystem. Occasionally, you recognize behavioral patterns or physical traits that remind you of your own younger days. The continuity provides satisfaction even as your direct involvement in pigeon society diminishes. Memory becomes both blessing and burden. You can recall the locations of dozens of former food sources that no longer exist, leading to wasted energy on fruitless searches. But you also remember survival techniques that proved effective in past emergencies, knowledge that occasionally proves crucial when facing new challenges. The pace of your daily routine slows dramatically. Tasks that once took minutes now require extended periods of rest and recovery. Simple activities like preening become more thorough, but also more tiring. You learn to prioritize essential activities while letting less critical behaviors slide. Your appetite for risk disappears almost entirely. Opportunities that once seemed worth pursuing now appear too dangerous or energy intensive. You watch younger birds take chances you would have taken in your prime, sometimes succeeding spectacularly and sometimes paying the price for their boldness. Experience teaches caution, but caution can also mean missed opportunities. The urban environment that once challenged your adaptability now feels familiar and predictable. You know where to find shelter during different types of storms, which humans are likely to provide food, and how to avoid the most dangerous areas. This knowledge provides security, but also highlights how much your world has contracted. Your grooming habits become more important as your natural oils and feather condition decline. You spend longer periods maintaining your plumage, understanding that good feather condition directly affects your ability to stay warm and dry. The vanity of youth transforms into practical necessity for survival. Sleep patterns fragment as age affects your circadian rhythms. You find yourself awake during traditionally quiet hours, listening to the subtle sounds of the city at night. These periods of wakefulness become opportunities for observation and reflection, watching the urban world from a perspective most pigeons never experience. Your tolerance for social conflict reaches zero. Confrontations that once energized you now seem pointless and exhausting. You develop strategies for avoiding disputes entirely, timing your activities to minimize contact with aggressive individuals. Peace becomes more valuable than pride or territorial claims. The sensory changes of aging affect how you experience the urban environment. Colors seem less vibrant, sounds become harder to distinguish, and your ability to detect subtle odors diminishes. You compensate by relying more heavily on familiar patterns and routines, reducing your dependence on acute sensory input. Your relationship with food becomes increasingly focused on quality over quantity. The garbage that sustained you for years now requires careful evaluation to avoid digestive problems. You become expert at identifying the freshest scraps and avoiding anything that might cause intestinal distress. Nutrition becomes a careful balance of necessity and caution. The city's seasonal cycles affect you more profoundly than in previous years. Spring brings relief from winter's hardships, but also exhaustion from surviving another cold season. Summer provides abundant food, but tests your heat tolerance. Autumn triggers anxiety about the approaching winter, knowing each one becomes harder to survive. Your territory shrinks to encompass only the most essential locations. The expansive range you once defended becomes impossible to patrol effectively. You focus on maintaining access to core resources, reliable food sources, secure roosting spots, and protected pathways between them. Quality of territory matters more than quantity. Younger pigeons occasionally seek you out, perhaps recognizing something valuable in your experience. You find yourself tolerating their presence more than you would have in your territorial prime. Sometimes their energy and enthusiasm remind you of your own youth, providing brief moments of vicarious vitality. The urban predators that once motivated constant vigilance become less of a concern as you spend more time in protected locations. Your reduced mobility makes you more vulnerable, but your increased caution and knowledge of safe spaces provide some compensation. Risk management becomes a careful calculation of energy expenditure versus security. Your breeding days are definitively over, eliminating the hormonal drives and territorial imperatives that once shaped your behavior. The freedom from reproductive pressures brings a kind of peace, allowing you to focus entirely on personal survival without the complications of mate selection or offspring care. Weather prediction becomes a crucial skill as your tolerance for harsh conditions decreases. You learn to read subtle environmental cues that indicate approaching storms or temperature changes. This meteorological sensitivity helps you prepare for challenging conditions before they arrive, maximizing your chances of finding adequate shelter. The urban infrastructure that supports your lifestyle continues evolving, but your ability to exploit new opportunities diminishes. Automated systems and technological changes that younger pigeons quickly learn to navigate become obstacles you prefer to avoid. Familiarity with existing resources becomes more valuable than adaptability to new ones. Your sleep becomes lighter and more easily disturbed as age affects your nervous system. The deep, restorative rest of youth gives way to fitful periods of semi-consciousness. You learn to find the quietest possible roosting spots and to take advantage of any opportunity for undisturbed rest. The social hierarchies of pigeon flocks shift around your changing position. You're no longer a competitor for resources or mates, but you're also not completely irrelevant. Your experience occasionally provides value to the flock, particularly during unusual situations where historical knowledge becomes useful. Pain becomes a constant companion as joints stiffen and old injuries make themselves known. The crashes and fights of your youth leave lasting effects that worsen with age. You learn to work around physical limitations, modifying your movements and activities to minimize discomfort while maintaining essential functions. Your appetite fluctuates unpredictably as digestive efficiency declines. Some days you feel ravenously hungry, but can only consume small amounts before feeling uncomfortably full. Other days, you have little interest in food despite obvious nutritional needs. Reading your body's signals becomes increasingly important and increasingly difficult. The urban environment that once seemed infinite with possibilities now feels constrained by your physical limitations. Buildings that were easily accessible now require energy you can't spare. Food sources that seemed abundant now feel scarce given your reduced competitive ability. Your world contracts even as the city around you continues expanding. Your memory occasionally plays tricks on you, leading to confusion about current versus past conditions. You might search for food sources that closed years ago, or expect seasonal patterns that have shifted due to climate change. The reliability of memory that once guided your survival sometimes becomes a liability. The winter arrives again, and you know with certainty that this will be your most difficult test yet. Your body has less reserves, less insulation, less ability to generate and maintain heat. Every cold night becomes a potential crisis, every storm a serious threat to survival. You find yourself spending entire days in the warmest possible locations, reluctant to venture out even for food unless absolutely necessary. The heating vent behind the restaurant becomes not just a preferred roosting spot, but a lifeline that makes the difference between surviving and succumbing to the cold. Your breathing becomes more labored during physical exertion. Simple activities, like flying to feeding locations, require rest periods that younger pigeons don't need. You learn to pace yourself carefully, understanding that overexertion could leave you too exhausted to escape from danger or return to shelter. The humans in your territory begin to notice your condition more obviously. Some show increased sympathy, providing extra food or tolerating your presence in areas where other pigeons might be discouraged. Others seem to recognize you as representative of urban wildlife's struggle, treating you with the respect you never received in your prime. Your social interactions become increasingly limited to other aging pigeons who share similar limitations and concerns. These relationships provide comfort and practical cooperation as you share information about the best sheltered spots and most accessible food sources. Survival becomes a collaborative effort among the city's elderly pigeon population. The urban predators pose different threats now that your escape abilities are compromised. You can no longer rely on speed or agility to avoid danger, instead depending on camouflage, careful timing, and knowledge of safe routes. Predator avoidance becomes more about planning and preparation than reflexive response. Your daily routine becomes increasingly ritualized as you optimize every movement for energy conservation. You know exactly when and where to find the most efficient food sources, how to minimize travel between essential locations, and which activities can be safely eliminated to preserve strength for survival necessities. The city's noise affects you differently as your hearing changes with age. Some frequencies become harder to detect, potentially masking approaching dangers. Other sounds seem amplified, making rest more difficult. You adjust your behavior to compensate for these sensory changes while maintaining awareness of critical audio cues. Your feathers require more maintenance as natural oil production decreases and wear patterns change. Preening becomes both more important and more exhausting. You learn to focus on the most critical areas while accepting that overall plumage condition will never match your youthful standards. The seasonal migrations of other bird species become more noticeable as your own mobility decreases. You watch flocks of younger, stronger birds pass through your territory, sometimes feeling a phantom urge to join them before reality reasserts itself. Your traveling days are definitively over. Your relationship with the urban environment becomes increasingly dependent on routine and familiarity. Changes that once represented interesting challenges now seem like obstacles to be avoided. You stick to known routes, trusted food sources, and proven shelter locations, sacrificing exploration for security. The winter deepens, and your energy reserves dwindle despite careful rationing. Each cold night becomes a test of whether you can maintain enough body heat to survive until dawn. Your breathing becomes more shallow, your movements more deliberate, your periods of activity increasingly brief. One particularly harsh morning, you wake up feeling fundamentally different. The cold has penetrated deeper than ever before, and your body's responses feel sluggish and disconnected. You recognize the signs you've seen in other aging pigeons. The final stage of urban survival has begun. You make it through that day and the next, and several more after that. But each dawn requires more effort than the last. Your world contracts to just the immediate area around your shelter, and even short foraging trips become major expeditions requiring careful planning and extended recovery periods. The humans who have noticed your condition continue providing what help they can. The elderly man in the park saves his best bread for you. The maintenance worker ensures your roosting spot remains undisturbed. These small kindnesses make the difference between desperation and dignity in your final days. Your breathing becomes increasingly labored even during rest. The pollution and dust that your lungs have filtered for years finally overwhelm your aging respiratory system. Each breath requires conscious effort, and deep sleep becomes impossible as your body struggles to maintain basic functions. The urban environment that shaped your entire existence continues its relentless pace around your slowing metabolism. Cars rush past with the same urgency. Humans hurry along sidewalks with unchanged purpose, and younger pigeons pursue their daily survival routines. But your participation in this urban symphony gradually diminishes to the role of observer rather than performer. On a gray winter morning, as snow begins to fall on the city that has been your entire world, you find yourself unable to generate enough energy to leave your sheltered roost. Your body has finally reached the limits of what urban survival can demand. The cold penetrates deeper than ever before, and this time, there's no warmth left to fight it. Your eyes close for the last time on the concrete landscape that tested, shaped, and ultimately sustained you for 4 remarkable years. In human terms, your life was brief and unremarkable, but in the harsh mathematics of urban wildlife survival, you achieved something extraordinary. You lived long enough to contribute your genetic legacy to the next generation, passing on the traits and learned behaviors that helped you master one of nature's most challenging environments. The city continues around your still form, indifferent to the end of one small life among millions. But your story joins the countless others that make up the larger narrative of urban adaptation and survival. Somewhere in the concrete canyons you called home, your descendants carry forward the lessons you learned through years of struggle, innovation, and perseverance. Your individual journey ends, but the species continues, each generation building on the successes of those who came before. The pigeons flying through your old territory tomorrow will face challenges you never imagined, but they'll approach them with wisdom that includes your hard-won discoveries about thriving in the urban jungle. In that continuation, in that endless adaptation to an ever-changing world, lies the true measure of your success. The maintenance worker finds you the next morning, a small gray form tucked against the heating vent that kept you alive through 3 winters. He pauses for a moment, perhaps recognizing you from the countless times he chose not to chase you away. Then he continues with his duties, because the city doesn't stop for individual endings, no matter how remarkable the story behind them. Your body disappears into the urban waste system, processed and forgotten within hours. There's no ceremony, no recognition of the intelligence that navigated traffic patterns and human behavior with scientific precision. The heating vent you claimed becomes available for the next desperate bird seeking warmth. The feeding spots you discovered return to serving whoever arrives first and fights hardest. But your influence ripples outward in ways the city will never track or measure. The aggressive chick from your first brood has claimed prime territory in the financial district, where office workers spill coffee and drop pastries with predictable regularity. It approaches humans with the same calculated boldness you demonstrated, weighing risks against rewards with inherited precision. Your cautious offspring developed different strategies entirely. It discovered that hospital parking lots offer unique advantages. Medical staff work long shifts and often eat meals outside, creating reliable scrap opportunities. The slower pace around medical facilities suits its temperament, and it's raised 4 successful broods in locations you never explored. The adaptable chick became something of a legend among local pigeons. It learned to exploit construction sites like no bird before it, following projects from foundation to completion and knowing exactly when workers would be most likely to drop food. Its innovation in temporary resource exploitation has been copied by dozens of other birds. Your genetic material continues circulating through the urban population in combinations you could never have predicted. A great-grandchild inherits your memory for human faces, combined with enhanced night vision from another lineage. Another descendant gets your territorial instincts merged with improved cold tolerance, developed by birds who survived harsher winters than you ever faced. The bridge where you hatched still shelters new generations of pigeons. The narrow ledges that seemed so precarious during your childhood continue serving as nurseries for chicks who will face challenges you never imagined. Some of these new arrivals carry fragments of your DNA, though they'll never know the bird who helped shape their survival capabilities. Urban development accelerates in ways that would astonish you. Buildings rise faster, technology integrates deeper into city infrastructure, and human behavior evolves in response to devices that didn't exist during your lifetime. The pigeons adapting to these changes approach them with flexibility that traces back to successful survivors like you. Your old territory gets divided among multiple younger birds who lack your historical knowledge but compensate with energy and aggression. They rediscover some of your techniques through trial and error while developing others that never occurred to you. Progress happens through this constant cycle of innovation, building on inherited wisdom. The elderly man who fed you in the park continues his routine, perhaps wondering why the familiar gray bird with the distinctive tail feather pattern stopped appearing. He scatters breadcrumbs in the same locations, unknowingly feeding your descendants who recognize his generosity without understanding the connection to their ancestor. Climate patterns shift beyond anything you experienced, bringing heat waves that force pigeons to seek shade in underground passages and cold snaps that freeze traditional water sources solid. The birds surviving these extremes possess adaptability genes refined through generations of urban selection pressure, including contributions from your successful reproductive history. New predators establish hunting territories in the urban core. Peregrine falcons nest on skyscraper ledges, using building updrafts to reach killing speeds that would have terrified you. But the pigeons they hunt possess evasion skills honed by ancestors who survived similar threats, creating an evolutionary arms race played out on concrete battlefields. Your descendants face food sources you never encountered as human eating habits continue evolving. Plant-based alternatives replace traditional fast food, changing the nutritional profile of dropped scraps. Automated food delivery reduces human foot traffic in some areas while creating new concentration points for resource exploitation. The social dynamics of pigeon flocks grow more complex as urban populations stabilize at higher density levels. Hierarchies become more stratified, territorial disputes more sophisticated, and cooperation more essential for accessing contested resources. The social intelligence you developed for navigating these relationships becomes increasingly valuable. Urban wildlife management strategies evolve beyond simple population control toward ecosystem manipulation. Cities implement birth control programs, habitat modification projects, and behavioral steering initiatives designed to influence wildlife patterns without direct elimination. Pigeons respond with counter-adaptations that would impress you with their creativity. Technology integration reaches levels that transform the urban environment into something resembling a living organism. Sensors monitor air quality, noise levels, and traffic patterns in real time. Automated systems respond to environmental conditions faster than any biological reflex. The city becomes simultaneously more predictable and more complex. Your great-great-grandchildren navigate this sensor-rich environment with inherited wariness of human technology combined with learned exploitation of automated systems. They discover that motion sensors can be triggered to create water drips during dry periods. They learn which automated food dispensers malfunction in ways that benefit opportunistic scavengers. The economic cycles that shaped resource availability during your lifetime become more volatile and unpredictable. Global supply chain disruptions affect local food waste patterns. Economic inequality creates stark differences between neighborhoods in terms of wildlife-accessible resources. Pigeons adapt by becoming more mobile and less territorially rigid. Climate change accelerates beyond the gradual shifts you experienced, bringing weather extremes that test every survival strategy your species has developed. Heat domes create temperatures that challenge the thermal tolerance limits of urban-adapted birds. Atmospheric rivers dump water in quantities that overwhelm traditional drainage systems. Your descendants face these climate challenges with inherited flexibility, enhanced by each generation's innovations. They develop behavioral thermoregulation techniques that surpass anything you needed. They learn to predict and prepare for weather events using environmental cues you never had to interpret. Urban air quality fluctuates wildly as cities implement pollution controls while dealing with increased density and activity. Some days bring cleaner air than you ever breathed. Others bring particulate levels that challenge respiratory systems evolved for cleaner environments. Pigeons develop enhanced filtering capabilities and behavioral adjustments to minimize exposure. The acoustic environment becomes increasingly complex as electric vehicles reduce traffic noise, while electronic systems add new layers of sound pollution. Urban pigeons adapt their communication systems to penetrate different types of background noise, developing call variations that would sound foreign to your generation. Light pollution reaches levels that fundamentally alter urban nighttime environments. LED systems create color spectrums that affect bird vision in ways scientists are still discovering. Pigeons adjust their circadian rhythms and develop new strategies for night roosting in environments that never truly become dark. Water availability becomes more controlled and less predictable as cities implement conservation measures and smart water management systems. Traditional sources like fountains operate on complex schedules that require careful observation to predict. Pigeons learn to exploit new water sources created by green infrastructure and climate adaptation projects. Urban vegetation changes as cities implement sustainability initiatives that favor native plants over the exotic species that provided food during your era. Pigeons adapt by developing more diverse feeding strategies and learning to exploit agricultural initiatives like rooftop gardens and vertical farming experiments. The human population continues shifting toward urban centers, bringing cultural diversity that affects wildlife interactions in unexpected ways. Different cultural attitudes toward urban animals create neighborhood by neighborhood variation in food availability and harassment levels. Pigeons learn to recognize and respond to these cultural differences. Genetic diversity within urban pigeon populations becomes more important as environmental pressures intensify. The successful breeding strategies you employed contribute to maintaining this diversity, ensuring that urban pigeon populations retain the flexibility necessary for continued adaptation to changing conditions. Your story becomes part of the larger narrative of urban wildlife success, joining countless other individual tales of adaptation and survival that collectively demonstrate nature's remarkable ability to thrive in human-dominated environments. The specific challenges you faced may become obsolete, but the principles of flexibility, intelligence, and persistence remain eternally relevant. Disease pressures evolve as urban wildlife populations reach new density levels, and climate change creates conditions favorable to different pathogens. Pigeons develop enhanced immune responses and behavioral modifications that reduce disease transmission while maintaining the social cohesion necessary for survival in urban environments. Urban architecture continues evolving in ways that affect all city wildlife. Building designs incorporate bird deterrent features while accidentally creating new nesting opportunities. Smart building systems respond to animal presence in ways that create both obstacles and opportunities for urban adapted species. Transportation systems undergo revolutionary changes that alter the fundamental structure of urban environments. Autonomous vehicles change traffic patterns and noise profiles. Hyperloop systems create new corridor effects. Even delivery drones add aerial obstacles that require navigational adjustments from flying urban wildlife. The waste streams that sustained you continue evolving as cities implement circular economy principles and advanced recycling technologies. Food waste decreases through improved supply chain management, but new types of organic waste emerge from urban agriculture and food processing innovations. Urban energy systems transition toward renewable sources that create new microclimates and habitat opportunities. Solar panel installations provide perching surfaces while generating heat islands. Wind turbines create air current patterns that affect flight routes. Even geothermal systems alter ground temperature patterns. Your descendants inherit not just your physical traits, but also the behavioral flexibility that allowed you to thrive in a rapidly changing environment. They approach new challenges with inherited problem-solving abilities refined by generations of urban survival, building on your success while developing innovations you never could have imagined. The urban ecosystem becomes increasingly complex as successful adaptation by multiple species creates new competitive relationships and cooperative opportunities. Pigeons must navigate not just human-created challenges, but also interactions with other urban-adapted wildlife whose populations have grown and stabilized. Urban planning increasingly incorporates wildlife considerations, but not always in ways that benefit pigeons specifically. Green infrastructure projects might favor other species while creating new obstacles for pigeons. Wildlife corridors designed for ground animals might fragment pigeon territories in unexpected ways. Your legacy extends beyond immediate genetic contributions to encompass the behavioral innovations and survival strategies you developed through years of urban living. These learned behaviors get transmitted through observation and imitation, spreading through pigeon populations in ways that complement genetic inheritance. The city that was your entire universe continues expanding and evolving, but the fundamental principles of urban survival remain constant. Success still requires intelligence, adaptability, and persistence. The specific applications of these principles change with conditions, but their importance never diminishes. Urban wildlife research advances to levels of sophistication that would amaze you, with scientists tracking individual animals through their entire lifespans and analyzing population genetics in real time. This research reveals the crucial role played by successful individuals like you, in maintaining urban wildlife populations. Your individual story concludes, but your contribution to the ongoing experiment of urban wildlife adaptation continues through countless descendants who face tomorrow's challenges with wisdom that includes your hard-won discoveries about thriving in the concrete jungle. Your story becomes part of something bigger than any single bird could imagine. The urban environment that challenged every survival instinct you possessed continues testing new generations with problems you never had to solve. Your descendants face cities that learn and adapt almost as quickly as the wildlife trying to exploit them. Smart city systems begin recognizing pigeon behavior patterns and responding accordingly. Automated sprinkler systems activate when sensors detect large bird gatherings. Food waste containers seal more tightly when motion detectors register scavenging activity. Even building management systems adjust ventilation and lighting to discourage roosting in sensitive areas. Your offspring adapt to this technological surveillance with inherited cunning enhanced by each generation's innovations. They learn to approach sensor blind spots, time their activities to avoid automated responses, and even exploit system malfunctions that create unexpected opportunities. The intelligence you used to read human behavior gets redirected toward understanding machine behavior. Urban agriculture expands as cities try to improve food security and sustainability. Vertical farms rise in converted warehouses, hydroponic systems appear on rooftops, and community gardens multiply in vacant lots. These agricultural initiatives create new food sources, but they also attract intensive pest control efforts that view pigeons as crop threats rather than urban wildlife. Your descendants navigate this agricultural landscape with the same opportunism you showed toward human food sources. They learn which crops provide the best nutrition when harvesting activities create accessible waste, and how to avoid the various deterrent systems designed to protect urban farming investments. Some even develop specialized techniques for accessing hydroponic nutrients. Climate adaptation becomes a survival imperative as weather patterns grow increasingly unpredictable. The seasonal cycles you learned to exploit become less reliable as spring arrives earlier, summer heat intensifies, autumn stretches longer, and winter brings unprecedented temperature swings. Traditional survival strategies require constant adjustment. Your great-grandchildren develop enhanced behavioral thermoregulation that surpasses anything you needed. They learn to seek underground cooling during extreme heat events, exploit building thermal mass for warmth during cold snaps, and recognize the subtle environmental cues that predict rapid weather changes. Your genetic contribution to temperature tolerance gets refined through each generation's experience. Urban predator populations reach new equilibrium points as cities become more wildlife-friendly while simultaneously more complex. Hawks establish permanent territories on skyscrapers using building updrafts and glass reflection patterns to hunt more effectively than their rural cousins. Urban owls adapt to city lighting, becoming active during twilight hours when traditional nocturnal hunting becomes possible. But pigeons evolve counter strategies that build on the predator awareness you developed. Your descendants learn to read building wind patterns that indicate hawk presence, recognize the acoustic signatures of different urban predators, and exploit the visual confusion created by glass and steel architecture to escape pursuit. Transportation infrastructure undergoes revolutionary changes that alter the fundamental geography of urban environments. Hyperloop systems create high-speed corridors that fragment traditional territories. Autonomous vehicle networks reduce street-level chaos while creating new aerial obstacles through delivery drone traffic. Even pedestrian patterns change as augmented reality guides people along optimized routes. Your offspring adapt their navigation systems to these transportation changes with inherited spatial intelligence refined by urban living. They learn to exploit the predictable patterns of automated systems, avoid the unpredictable movements of drone traffic, and find new movement corridors through increasingly complex three-dimensional urban landscapes. Urban waste management reaches near-perfect efficiency as cities implement AI-driven optimization systems. Food waste decreases through predictive analytics that prevent overproduction. Organic matter gets diverted to automated composting systems that process materials too quickly for scavenging. Even traditional garbage collection becomes precisely timed to minimize wildlife access. But pigeons prove remarkably creative in finding new resource streams. Your descendants learn to exploit the brief windows when automated systems malfunction, discover that even efficient waste management creates processing byproducts, and develop techniques for accessing the new types of organic waste generated by urban agriculture and food processing innovations. Social structures within pigeon populations become more sophisticated as urban environments support higher density communities. Flock hierarchies develop multiple layers of organization, with specialized roles emerging for different types of resource exploitation. Communication systems evolve to handle more complex information sharing about dispersed food sources and territorial boundaries. Your genetic contribution to social intelligence becomes increasingly valuable as these complex communities require more sophisticated relationship management. The diplomatic skills you developed for mate selection and territorial negotiation get enhanced and passed down through generations that face increasingly competitive social environments. Urban energy systems transition toward renewable sources that create entirely new microenvironments within cities. Solar panel installations generate heat islands that attract roosting birds while creating reflection patterns that affect flight navigation. Wind turbine systems alter air current flows in ways that require new flight techniques. Even geothermal installations change ground temperature patterns that affect foraging behavior. Your descendants adapt to these energy infrastructure changes with inherited behavioral flexibility enhanced by each generation's learning. They discover that solar installations create reliable warming spots during cold weather, learn to exploit wind patterns generated by renewable energy systems, and even develop techniques for accessing water condensed by various clean energy technologies. Urban planning increasingly incorporates real-time environmental monitoring that affects all city wildlife. Air quality sensors trigger automated responses that can suddenly change available habitat. Noise monitoring systems activate sound dampening technologies that alter acoustic environments. Even traffic flow optimization creates constantly shifting patterns of human activity that affect resource availability. Pigeons learn to interpret these monitoring systems as environmental cues, developing the ability to predict when and where automated responses will create opportunities or obstacles. The observational skills you use to read human behavior get enhanced and redirected toward understanding complex technological systems. Food security initiatives transform urban eating patterns in ways that affect all scavenging wildlife. Meal delivery optimization reduces food waste while concentrating it at specific processing centers. Urban farming initiatives change the types of organic matter available for consumption. Even food packaging innovations alter the accessibility of dropped or discarded items. Your offspring develop new foraging strategies that exploit these changing food systems with inherited opportunism enhanced by generational learning. They learn to time their activities around food processing schedules, exploit the brief windows when delivery systems malfunction, and access nutrition from the new types of organic waste generated by sustainable food initiatives. Urban water management becomes increasingly sophisticated as cities implement smart conservation systems and climate adaptation infrastructure. Traditional water sources like fountains operate on complex algorithms that optimize usage while minimizing waste. Green infrastructure creates new temporary water sources that appear and disappear based on weather patterns and system demands. Your descendants develop enhanced water location skills that build on the resource identification abilities you perfected. They learn to predict when and where smart water systems will create accessible sources, exploit rainwater collection systems during dry periods, and even access water generated by various building climate control systems. Disease management in urban wildlife populations becomes more proactive as cities implement monitoring systems that track pathogens spread through animal communities. Vaccination programs target specific wildlife populations, while habitat modifications attempt to reduce disease transmission without eliminating species entirely. Pigeons adapt to these disease management efforts with inherited immune capabilities, enhanced by exposure to urban pathogens over generations. Your genetic contribution to disease resistance becomes part of a larger evolutionary response to urban health challenges, helping maintain population stability despite intensive management efforts. That's the complete story of your life as a pigeon, from that first crack in the shell to your final breath on a cold winter morning. You lived every moment in one of nature's most demanding classrooms. The city tested you with predators, weather, competition, and constant change. But you didn't just survive, you mastered it. You raised offspring, claimed territory, and proved that intelligence and adaptability can overcome almost anything. Your story ends, but your legacy lives on in descendants who carry your lessons into an ever-changing urban world, continuing the remarkable tale of one species that refused to be defeated by concrete and steel. Here you can find the next video. Until then, see you soon.